Et bonjour à toutes et tous. On va commencer ce webinaire TRACCS ce matin. On laisse encore quelques collègues nous rejoindre, mais on va démarrer sans trop tarder. Donc ce webinaire aujourd'hui sera en anglais, exceptionnellement. Donc je vais basculer en anglais. I'm very happy that we have this webinar today for TRACCS. So my name is Samuel Morin. I'm the co-director of TRACCS together with Masa Kagayama, who's also online. And this morning we have the pleasure to host this webinar with Francisco Paco Doblas-Reyes from Catalonia. Is working at the Barcelona Supercomputing Center and the Institute Catalan of Advanced Research and Studies, if I translate correctly, working from Spain. And Paco is well known in a climate modeling community for various reasons, but here today we've invited him to talk about Climateurope2, which is a European project aiming at a number of activities related to climate services. And today we'll talk about standardization of equitable climate services by supporting a community of practice. And this very much resonates with what we intend to do in TRACCS. And Paco, by the way, is member of our scientific and stakeholder advisory committee of TRACCS. So here we are very happy to have him today with us. To share what's done in Climateurope2 and really to enable us to benefit from these achievements and to see how we can better collaborate at a European scale on this topic, which is critical for our work and for TRACCS in particular. So Paco, I leave you the floor for the presentation, and then we'll have some time for questions. We usually, this webinar, we keep them short, so it will be 1 hour total. So you can share the screen and start when you're ready. And so we're engaging in the discussion after your speech. So thanks again for being here.
Merci beaucoup Samuel et Massa aussi pour l'opportunité de présenter le projet à la communauté TRACCS. Et je continue en anglais, c'est beaucoup plus simple pour moi. So I'm going to present the Climateurope2 project as Samuel has explained, and I'll introduce some concepts that are not usually familiar or used in the climate services arena. And I hope that they'll be interesting, in particular because in Climateurope2 we are interested in engaging with the national initiatives related to the progress of climate services. We are doing it already at the WMO level because WMO is a partner in the project, but also with different countries. For instance, we have an open discussion with TWD to see how they can participate in the work that we are carrying out in Climateurope2. The work in Climateurope2 starts from the fact that climate services has a bit of a hazy definition. We all are aware that climate risk assessment, climate adaptation and mitigation, they all require access to reliable climate information. And often we tend to think that climate information is coming from the output of climate models merged with climate observations, and that this is a good way of providing climate information, and that this would be enough to satisfy the requirements of a number of users. However, as you can see in the figure on the right, which is taken from the European Climate Risk Assessment Report that has been published this year and delivered to the European Parliament, the boxes inside the red rectangle are those that are related to physical climates, and the other boxes describe the relations that and the other factors, non-climatic factors, that influence the estimates of climate-related risks for, in this particular case, the infrastructure sector, anything that has to do with the building domain. And as you can see, the light blue boxes are just a minority compared to many other boxes that actually determine the risks that are related to climate variability and climate change at the European level. So that made the community think, and this is only one example, there are thousands of examples along the same lines, that the definition of climate services has to go much farther than the common understanding of climate information, what climate information is. And in Climateurope2, we use the definition that appears in the screen. So climate services are the provision of climate information to assist decision-making by the individuals and organizations. And that involves the engagement with an appropriate engagement with all the actors, an access mechanism, and the responsiveness to the user needs. And this is always in the recognition that climate as a factor is only just one of the many drivers that determine our relation to climate in the different climate-sensitive sectors in society and in the ecosystems. When we talk about climate services, apart from having a very broad definition that is it's very flexible in that determines our understanding of what is and what is not a climate service, we rarely talk about what is the quality of a climate service. We are familiar with what the quality of a piece of climate data is, and at times even we might even have gone as far as determining if a climate information, which is a transformation of the data into some sort of knowledge, is of quality or not. But then the quality of the service itself is something much more complex. And somehow the quality assurance of a service, in particular of climate services, is intending to assess the fitness for purpose of the climate service against some standards. And that considers many different angles that are relevant for the service provision. The tools used, the workflows followed to develop the products, the data used as a source, the applications that determine the actual information that reaches the user, the provenance of that information, the documentation, the user engagement so that it's not biased, and many other aspects. And unfortunately, although we have some conventions for some of these angles, we don't have standards for them. And standards are important, and they are pervasive. They appear in many different domains of knowledge and technology. For instance, in where I work at the Barcelona Supercomputing Center, something that is very common knowledge is how do we measure the software quality against standard, and that standard is the ISO 9126 standard, which has also some extensions and that considers many different components that are related to software quality. Many of these standards, they are very closely related to the ISO 9000 family of standards that measure quality of products and services. So what are standards? Standards are specifications, also measurable requirements, processes or performance conventions, and they are aimed at achieving consistency between the processes, products, and services. In our case, it would be all of this related to climate. It's also important to consider and to bear in mind that that standards are developed through a consensus process, and that it involves a number of legitimate organizations that are the ones that give credibility to those standards and that ensure that they have conformity. Why do we need standards, and in particular, why do we need them in climate services? Well, it's pretty obvious that we have a lack of a widely agreed criteria to determine if climate services are transparent, if they are trustworthy, or if they are equitable in a market that is continuously growing. The guidance that exists is very fragmented, and it's actually very difficult to have a comprehensive understanding of what this guidance actually is. And when I'm talking of guidance here, I go much farther than what WMO offers, which is incredibly valuable, but that only covers a very small part of what climate services are. The benefits of having these standards is that they are allowed to have a common terminology and methodologies that they ensure that there is a fair comparison between services and products. They also can ensure the functionality of the products, the interoperability, and the reduced risks for the operators that provide those services. And at the same time, they underpin the credibility and relevance of the climate services. They are needed for to achieve a comprehensive guidance for the development of products and the delivery of the service. And they allow us to identify clear distinctions between the components that can be standardized and also those that can't or shouldn't be standardized, and that need to be left evolve so that we don't prevent innovation. At the same time, they allow for the establishment of certification mechanisms that for some aspects of climate services exist, but not for most of the other components. And they identify as well accredited actors that can certify and assure the quality of the services. The way we are addressing these challenges is by involving all the relevant actors in the climate services arena. That includes national initiatives, but also international initiatives, the role of many users of climate services in many different sectors, and also the role of the private sector as a key driver for the penetration of climate services. We're also applying the principle of equitability. So we want to really make sure that all the actors receive the recognition that they deserve in the development of climate services and in their provision. And Climateurope2 is a project that is trying to address all these gaps by creating a framework, an arena that allows the standardization of a robust standardization of climate services. Climateurope2 is a European project, as Samuel said before. It started in late 2022, and it will still run for a few more years. It's a coordination and support action of Horizon Europe. It's quite unusual because it's a very large coordination and support action funded at the level of 9 million. And with many different partners coming from academia, from the international providers of climate services, from med services, and also from the private sector. And it has three main goals. The first one is to develop recommendations for the standardization of climate services. The second one is to support the European climate services community in an equitable manner, recognizing and identifying as many actors as possible and offering them the possibility of participating in the process of formulating those recommendations for the standardization of climate services. And finally, also there is an aim to increase the uptake of quality assured climate services that will increase the competitiveness and the protection of the European society. This is a very complex image that summarizes the activity in the project and that underpins the work that we are carrying out to prepare the recommendations for standards. Somehow we start here at the center where all the partners are actually participating in co-production workshops as we move towards the development of those recommendations, and the use of a number of case studies that we use to identify what are the guidelines that we need to collect and use for supporting the recommendations. There is a very strong engagement and outreach component, as in all the CSAs, but also to extract information from the climate services community. And we also have a very intense participation of all the partners in the formulation of a framework for the elaboration of those recommendations, and the current landscape of existing guidance and standards that are related to climate services. For instance, all those standards that are being revised at the European and global level for including the perspective of climate change. To do all this work, we have defined a number of components of climate services that allows us to define what is the relation of the different actors in the formulation of climate services, the formulation and delivery. And we also have a very strong connection with the European normalization body, Sense and Elec, with whom we are collaborating in different forms, and to whom we need to deliver what is known as a SEN workshop agreement, which is it's a document that will collect the information, all the information that we are elaborating in the project, and that we deliver every year in the form of a synthesis report that is publicly available. I mentioned the landscape as an element that allows us to get started in the identification of standard sign guidelines. This is an image of one of the exercises that we have done that tries to identify the formal standards, both at the European, national, and international level, that are relevant to climate services. That includes standards for adaptation and mitigation, for adaptation alone, also sectoral standards that have to do with the sectors that are climate sensitive, and many other standards that have to do with the development and management and the estimation of quality of services and products. We do similar exercises continuously. We are revising the mapping that you can see here every year, and we are developing another one in parallel for to assess what the standards in the mitigation arena are, and how their relevance for the standardization of climate services could be. And we also have a complete mapping of all the relevant guidelines from WMO that are related to climate services. That includes the delivery and the recording and delivery of climate data in many different forms, the development of services at the level of the national weather services, and so on. So we collect all this information, and this is an essential element of what we will deliver to both the European Commission and to the Sense and Elec, to the European normalization body. I mentioned the climate services components that we have identified according to the definition of climate services that we have agreed in the project. And these climate services components they have been very useful, and they have allowed us to have a much more efficient interaction with the different actors that are involved in the definition and delivery of climate services. We have 4 components, and you'll see that what we are very often familiar with about climate services appears mainly in one of those components, and the other 3 have to do with other aspects that we consider that are as important as, for instance, the delivery of climate data. One of them is the decision context, so the context in which users make decision, and we need to identify the aspects that we pay attention to is whether this decision-making context is properly identified and described, whether it's adaptable and flexible, or aspects related to, for instance, the role of the market in that decision-making context. The second component is the ecosystem of actors and co-production processes that allow the delivery of climate services. And we pay attention to whether the stakeholder mapping that has been used to deliver the climate services complete, which methodologies were used, and whether they integrate all the relevant voices, whether the application of the co-production methods to the knowledge is satisfactory, or the level of transparency that has been achieved in scoping the definition of this service. The knowledge systems include many of the aspects that are very familiar to those that work mainly in the physical climate domain, like, for instance, the metadata, the provenance of the tools used to deliver a piece of climate information, the backwards compatibility of any of the information pieces delivered, and some of the quality control and assurance of the data and processes that are typically used in producing climate data, using it as a source to prepare climate information. And then the fourth component considers the aspects related to how the climate service is delivered and how it is evaluated. And for instance, we are interested in aspects that have to do with the timeliness of the delivery, the way it is visualized and portrayed to those that make the decisions, whether there is a clear accountability of the information that is delivered, or aspects related to whether there is an auditability and certifiability of those that are providing the service. We are in the climate services arena still very far from it. The process that we use to identify the guidelines that I mentioned before has been agreed in the project. It involves many different people. Typically in our workshops, internal workshops, we have between 20 and 50 participants with many different profiles that cover people working on anthropology, all the way down to philosophy, economy, or the design of business models. All the information that we collect is stored in a centralized database that we call the knowledge platform, and that is open to all those that are part of the climate services community in Europe and that are happy to register in that platform. The different partners, they work on identifying those guidelines, and for instance, this is an example of the kind of work that those working on the identification of the climate data and the use of this climate data to deliver climate information are finding. So, for instance, when they pay attention to metadata formats and vocabularies, they have identified, for instance, the importance of using the FAIR principles to consider the evolution of formats and vocabularies and metadata, taking into account that even within the climate data community, there are many different conventions that live together. And the same applies to all the guidelines that we identify concerning the provenance of the tools that are used to provide the climate information, how uncertainty and risk assessment is considered when preparing a product, or, for instance, how do we verify the quality of the climate data that is being used to formulate the climate product. But we also pay attention to many other aspects, like, for instance, how do we measure the quality of the service from different perspectives? For instance, in terms of the documentation that is provided, in terms of the scientific expertise that is behind those that are providing the climate service, whether there is a clear idea of the demand and the other aspects related to the users, the timeliness and accessibility, the sustainability of the service, whether the service is a one-off or it can have a place in the market. And when we talk about the market in Climateurope2, we are not just thinking of the markets in a monetary terms, but as the ensemble of all those that are delivering a service, being coming from the either the private or the public sector. And the ultimate goals that we have identified for the climate service, that is emerging from all these guidelines that we have identified from many different perspectives, is that the service should be trusted, it should be usable, it needs to have a measure of its value for the user, and it needs to have an impact assessment. And this is applicable to services that are in the public domain and also in the private domain, and that's where standards really come as a key element that can favor the measurement of the quality of all this service. We perform all this work in the project with the participation of the different work packages. I won't enter into the details of what each work package is doing, but we perform regularly expert elicitation exercises where we identify through a decision tree that is part of the framework for standardization what are the key elements identified in the previous few months from the different partners in the project. And that this information is collected in the form of a synthesis report that we issue annually through several iterations throughout the project, and that this underpins the recommendations that will be the final outcome of the project, and also that will be the body of the ASCEN workshop agreement that will deliver to both the European Commission and to CEN-CENELEC. An example of the key messages that we reach every year is offered here. This is the first version, is the key messages. It's an illustration of the key messages that we achieved at the end of the first year. We are now working on the second version that will be available in January. And this is a very brief summary of a 60-page document that collects all the knowledge that we have achieved during the first year of the project. And as you can see, this is formulated in the form of 9 different messages that, when read this way, they might all seem completely common sense and pretty obvious. But it's the first time that they are put together in a single document with full traceability of the sources that have allowed us to reach this conclusion. So, for instance, some of the messages go into aspects that have to do with the sustainability of society in the future, in the context of the current climate change situation. And we reached the conclusion that the standardization of climate services supports evidence-based resilience to climate impacts, green investments, and transformations to a sustainable future. So it's not just about climate change, it's about adaptation, and it's about the transformation that comes along with the mitigation efforts. And it goes on and on with the details for all these 9 messages that we reached in the first year of the project. So, for instance, we also recognize the importance of having guidance documents for the climate data that is available. But in particular, this is very important when the documentation is incomplete and is driven by providers rather than the users. So there is a lot of documentation out there that is not understandable by the users of the climate data that is being provided. I won't go into detail as mentioned before, but I would like to mention 2 or 3 more things that are important to us in the project. One of them is the ongoing discussion about the aspects related to certification, labeling, maturity of the standards and guidelines. For us, certification is an aspect that will be built after the standards are available, because an operator will be certified against a number of standards and guidelines, and it will be done by third parties. These are actors that should be accredited by accreditation bodies, and it's still not clear who those accreditation bodies are going to be, and that will be verifying the operators are conformed to the according to the standards that have been agreed by the standardization bodies at the European and national levels. The labeling is another aspect that we are considering in the project, and we are discussing it, and we are aware that in particular when it comes to the user perspective, the defining labels is fundamental. We are all familiar with a different kind of labels that are accompanying the products that are available in the market, and that currently they are completely missing in the climate services that are delivered to make decisions that are incredibly relevant for risk assessment, adaptation, and mitigation. We have identified a very wide community that should be invited to participate in these activities of the Climateurope2 project. Here you have a summary, but these activities, these members of the community need also to be as equitable as possible. So the exercise that we do to try to identify the members of the community that are underrepresented includes, for instance, the some exercises like, for instance, what we call the Climateurope2 roadshows. This is a partner in Serbia that is traveling around Eastern Europe, introducing aspects related to climate change, to climate variability, and climate services, and collecting feedback from many different actors that are acting and that are sensitive to climate in countries like Bosnia-Herzegovina, Albania, or North Macedonia. We also have a very well-attended series of web festivals. So these are events that take place every 6 months and that we host in Climateurope2 that take place online over 2 or 3 days, and that's where we invite projects from European projects and also national projects to share their views and their experiences in terms of climate services. While at the same time, we also organize some other sessions that to make everyone familiar about the activities that we undertake in Climateurope2. Every 2 years, we also organize every 18 months, we also organize the what we call festivals, which are much larger events. They are in person, and they are mainly targeting interaction between different actors in the climate services community in person to extract as much information as we can from the climate services community to be fair to what everyone considers as important and to be included in the recommendations for the standardization of climate services. And some of the things that we continuously pay attention to is who to invite and who to encourage to participate in these events, web festivals, webinars that we organize. On one side, we monitor continuously the number of projects in the Cordis repository of the European Commission that are related to climate services in the description of their work. And this is something that allows us to identify a large number of European projects that we invite to these events. And we also have a Climate Europe network that comes now with around 400 people that we use also to disseminate on one side the activities of such as the web festivals, and at the same time to sample their feedback concerning the preliminary recommendations and guidelines that we are formulating. But there is a lot of actors that are not that easy to engage with, and that includes, for instance, the community of private providers of climate services. For those actors, we have targeted events like the one that will take place next year here in Barcelona, that will be somehow organized with a different way to the kind of events that we typically organize in academia and in the context of the of the national weather services. It's an event that will be exclusively for the private sector, and that will be run under the Chatham House rules. So basically, there will be confidentiality will be applied to anything that is being said there. There will be another event at the end of next year, this one focusing on the banking sector and the insurance sector. And the goal is always the same, is to expose them to the need for the standardization of climate services, to identify what their needs in terms of climate services are, and to also let them know that it's their opportunity to influence the standards of climate services at the European level. Now that, for instance, the Commission has issued a request for the process of standardization to be started, and I'll say a few words in my last part one slide. All this engagement with actors in the community comes along with an additional amount of work, which is the management of all the personal data and personal interactions that we are carrying out in the project. We are fully aware of the constraints that the GDPR implies, and we have a central repository where we store all these interactions that we are having with different people, and also the consent forms that they all sign when they are, for instance, agreeing to be part of the Climateurope2 network, when they agree to be interviewed, and we store the interview as well, and this is something that we do systematically. And when they are filling a survey or a questionnaire, and their personal information is also collected. This is easier said than done, in particular when one wants to do it in a traceable and centralized way, but we are learning by doing, and we plan to document all the lessons that we are learning in a corresponding document. This is my last slide. As I said before, the European Commission, just after the start of Climateurope2, decided that it was a good time to standardize formally the climate services. It has prepared standardization requests that it has sent to Sensenelec, to the European normalization body. And then Sensenelec has asked the Technical Committee 467, which is the one that deals with the standards on adaptation to climate change, to create a working group that, among other things, will start the process of standardizing climate services. The role of Climateurope2 through a liaison agreement is to participate in the discussions of that this working group, and also starting from next year, to formulate to get the started the process of the same workshop agreement, where we will collect all the lessons and all the guidelines and recommendations that we will have collected in the project activities. And that's the end of my presentation. I hope it wasn't too long, or not it's excessively long for what you had in mind, Samuel.
That's great. Thank you very much, Paco. That's very informative, and I think it provides a lot of food for thought in our community. Many thanks again. Among the audience, don't hesitate who asked question. I understand that the question can be asked either in French or English, and as Paco is very fluent in French, at least for understanding the question. So the first question I see is from Pascal Maurice as a question. I thought someone else, but Pascal, you can start.
Yes, thank you. Thanks a lot. I'm very glad to see how far the reflections have already gone. And I could hear it throughout the presentation. And my question arises on the accountability of uncertainties. So I've seen that it is written everywhere, robust decision making. and the uncertainty should be presented, for example, in documentation. The real challenge that I see is that it can be nicely said and written how to use the estimation, for example, with warning about model uncertainties or climate change acceleration, for example, black swans and so on. But in practice, how to have it provided for the user at the place where he uses the information. And the feedback I can see from climate services is that however well documented the uncertainties are, in practice, users take the information most of the time blankly and with a direct confidence in the output of the estimations. And this is really prone to maladaptation. So it's really the case. We've got in France some climate services with platforms providing data, and there are some warnings on the other hand, but the warnings are not used, read, understood, and the data is used in a straightforward way, and it really improves the vulnerability of our territory.
Okay, so the question would be, what is
how do you stream the knowledge into the service itself?
Okay, so
standardization.
This has to do more with the market than with the standards themselves. So the existence of standards doesn't really prevent any misuse of the product. This is one of the things. So one of the ways to prevent this is to focus less on the data and focus more on the people. So to really, instead of documenting what the uncertainty of climate projection is, which don't take me wrong, this has to be done, to focus more on what is the actual understanding of what climate uncertainty actually means, with and without climate change, from the perspective of a specific user. Some users might be willing to work together with those that are interested in explaining and working together on a narrative that embeds the uncertainty into the decision making of that particular user. Some others might not be willing to spend the time to do this kind of thing, and this happens very often. But if we take the example of an aspirin, so an aspirin is a product that we can all buy in the pharmacy. The aspirin has been manufactured according to very strict regulations, standards on how to manufacture drugs, medicines. It comes along with an incredibly detailed documentation that is included in the box where one has the aspirins. The person who sells the aspirins is certified to sell aspirins and many other things, but you cannot buy aspirins when you buy sweets. So you have to go to a pharmacy to get the aspirins. And in spite of this, there are people who take aspirins even if they know that they are not good for them because they have some circulatory problems. So the existence of standards, certification, and even full documentation doesn't fully prevent the misuse of a product. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't standardize and certify. It means that there is much more to be done, but for sure, the standardization and certification helps a lot to at least to make people aware that there is something to pay attention to.
Yes, but couldn't be part of the standardization that pure data should not be provided as a service, but data plus expertise or contextualization. But because we have to manually accept or refuse some services in France because they are lacking this human experience and the usability of the data.
Completely agree with you. The provision of data is not a climate service. And if you remember my initial definition, the climate service is a provision, it's a joint provision of climate information in context for a decision. So data doesn't lead to a decision. So data is data. It's as if you were buying, a piece of land somewhere with no trees on them. So, well, there's a lot of work to be done afterwards. Yeah.
Yeah, and here that reflects on one of the key messages from the IPCC chapter that we were, Paco, you were leading. That data is not information. That's something we hear a lot throughout TRACCS. So there's a question from Gabriel. Maybe Gabriel, you want to ask it online, or I can read it loudly. Okay, you can't ask the question. So the question is in the chat box. It says, well, would these services provide only data on climate impact drivers and or data on hazards directly? And it provides examples like Climateurope and Aqueduct. I'm not sure I know them. I don't know whether Paco that rings a bell for you. And I think it relates to the previous question. But yeah, if you want to comment.
Yeah. Somehow these kind of services are providing some components of a climate service, but they are not a climate service. So if I imagine, I don't know, Meteo France, for instance, it's very unlikely that Meteo France is going to deliver a climate service without engaging with who is going to use that service. It's a matter of reputation. It's a matter of responsibility. It's a matter of mandate. So and that's why it's so difficult to provide a climate service. A climate service, according to the definition, it's because it requires individual engagement, or at least engagement with communities and with sectors. I'm not saying that services like Climateurope and Aqueduct are not useful. That by all means, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that when these data, or even if it's focusing on climatic impact drivers or on hazard information, it should come along with a warning, a sort of disclaimer saying, well, this data should be used with extreme care because it hasn't been fine-tuned or adapted to a specific decision. And this is something, that disclaimer is one of the things that is part of our recommendation. So if you don't have a full climate service, you need to have disclaimers all over the place in your service.
Yeah. I don't see other questions online right now, so don't be shy, don't hesitate. So I have one actually. In the meantime, could you talk to us about the engagement of the French community in a very broad sense, not only the scientific community, but more broadly, well, French stakeholders in a broad sense in Climateurope2? My current understanding is it's pretty low and lower than it should be. And the point is, what can we do together to improve that situation? Because I'm convinced we can do a lot more together.
Yeah, I'm convinced too. And well, there are just a few French partners there. Ramboll is there, and also the Climate Data Factory. So they are both from the private sector, which it's incredibly valuable to us. But from academia, from the weather service, we have no one. Well, you were Samuel in the initial discussions about Climateurope. So by all means, that will be familiar to you. The way we are engaging with other actors that are not partners in the project is to invite them in the festivals, to have one-to-one discussions with them. It's a matter of offering them the opportunity to say what they consider important to be included in those recommendations. What is important to realize is two things. The first one is that the European Commission has decided that this goes ahead. It's not for discussion. It's happening. And the second one is that if we don't say something, if we don't explain what and express what we think is fundamental for standard climate services, it will be too late, because then the standards will be formulated and people will have to wait for the new extension of the process. And that's why the private sector is so interested in the evolution of Climateurope2. They are very interested because it's going to affect them. It might take 3 or 4 or 5 years, but it's going to happen. It's going to fall upon them, and it's going to be added up to the increasing regulation on sustainability, on the European taxonomy. All this is very complicated, and often companies they find themselves that they have to deal with that, even if they didn't have that saying when the whole thing was, all that regulation was being created. Well, Climateurope2 is offering them an opportunity to have a voice. And the same happens to the Med services, although the Med services are very well represented by WMO, and WMO is very much engaged in Climateurope2. But yeah, for instance, with Barbara Frew, I've been discussing on organizing a workshop for Med services in Europe, interested in having more information about Climateurope2, but also to have a saying in anything that might still be missing in these recommendations.
Okay. Many thanks. So webstival will be the best approach to get started with Climateurope2 as an academic member or as a single person.
Yeah, absolutely. The webstivals, and the webstivals are not just events for Climateurope2. We have lots of sessions that are organized by other projects, and if TRACCS is interested in organizing a session in the Climateurope2 webstivals, or even in the festival that will take place next year in Belgrade, you're most welcome to suggest a session of your interest.
Yeah, I see Sandrine has raised a hand.
Good morning, and thank you for your talk. I may have a question concerning the evaluation of your climate services, and how do you evaluate the utility of a climate services, and at which horizon? I mean, transformation may take time, and so how do you handle this question of the evaluation, and how, transformation can be really captured in your evaluation procedure?
Yeah, it's a very good question, and very hard to answer. So evaluation and verification is one of the is part of one of the components of climate services in the project, and the way we are doing it is against the standards, or against the guidelines, because not everything can be standardized. But all the recommendations that we formulate are coming along with verifiable objectives. So it's the only way to have to create a mechanism for auditing the different activities. So of course it will be very generic at this stage. But you were asking as well about the horizon. So the horizon is not part of the discussion, in the sense that, as you say, the transformation, it might take a long time for the transformation to take place, but the decisions are being made now. So there is an incredibly large number of actors, climate sensitive actors, that are interested in the current climate, because they know that they don't have a good estimate of what the current climate is, and they struggle to estimate what is the actual risk for their current operations, not in 20 years time, today, for the operations that they have today. And this is another thing that forced us to really get the time horizon away out of the discussion, because the variety of decisions is incredibly large, and we actually talking to the private sector, in particular the energy sector, agriculture, tourism. They are very interested in the very short term. They are not that interested in, they don't do big investments. They do relatively small investments, and they need something in the short term, and they really need to have a good way to validate what they are getting right now.
And do you have so far a kind of a list of questions you address to the stakeholders? And because in fact, just to explain you my question, we are going to do the same kind of evaluation procedure in TRACCS, so it would be perhaps helpful to start from your list of questions and to see what you have done so far, and in order to get some inspiration, and then we can share with you after all how we will make this document different, or adding more questions and so on. So
Yeah,
can we share such a document? That would be very helpful. Yeah.
They can put you in touch with the Word package that deals with the measures of quality, for instance. They are doing a very interesting work. Actually, I shared with them the questionnaire that TRACCS had published already recently. I think it was a few weeks ago, because I found it very interesting and a good source of inspiration for them. So by all means, I think it would be great to try to align and learn from each other. We are publishing questionnaires every 3 to 4 months, so there are quite a few. We try not to do too many, because then you reach user fatigue very quickly. But there are questionnaires on aspects that have to do with the policy relevant aspects, anthropological aspects, quality measures aspects, and there are business models, for instance. It's another aspect that is being considered from that's more for interviews than questionnaires. Yeah, there are lots of activities like this, but I can start by putting you in touch with the people working on the quality aspects of the
okay, thank you. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot.
And the thing is, we're now I mean, in TRACCS we're in a speed up mode now at the moment, in a ramping up mode. Like with the people that a number of them are actually attending the webinar this morning, or have been hired recently as part of the TRACCS program. So it's now that we can have more capability to invest in those relationships, because the people who are specifically hired through TRACCS are joining us right now. Okay, thank you. I think we will close the discussion now. Many thanks for all those who asked questions. I will just quickly share my screen to remind everyone of steps in TRACCS and the upcoming events. So we'll have another webinar TRACCS will be on December 13, donc le 13 décembre, de 11h à 12h comme aujourd'hui, un vendredi, qui sera présenté par Kevin Lamy, qui travaille à l'OSU Réunion, et qui traitera des connaissances et solutions pour l'adaptation des territoires d'outre-mer tropicaux au changement climatique. Donc sur un sujet portant sur la synthèse des connaissances sur ce sujet qui résonne aussi avec beaucoup d'enjeux de TRACCS. Et puis rappeler aussi l'Assemblée générale du programme qui aura lieu à Grenoble du 4 au 6 février 2025, avec un certain nombre de réunions des projets ciblés TRACCS qui se tiendront au cours de la même semaine. Voilà pour cette information que vous retrouverez bien sûr sur le site web de TRACCS et sur nos différents moyens de partager de l'information. Merci encore à Paco d'avoir été avec nous ce matin et de cette présentation très intéressante. Donc, je pense que le message est bien passé, hein. La standardisation des services climatiques est en marche, et Climateurope2 est le bon mécanisme pour y participer avant que tout soit gravé dans le marbre pour une certaine durée. Je pense qu'on ne peut pas faire plus clair comme message et comme information pour motiver nos collègues à y participer dès lors qu'ils s'intéressent au développement et à l'usage des services climatiques. Voilà, j'espère, Paco, que j'ai bien résumé sur ce dernier point. Merci encore à toutes et tous pour votre participation. Bonne suite de journée et à bientôt. Merci beaucoup.